Were the people of the Bible black? Before you answer that, ask yourself something. Why does that question make you uncomfortable? Whether you said yes, no, or I don't know, something just happened in your chest. A reaction. And that reaction is the entire point of this video. Because the question itself isn't controversial. It's a historical question with historical evidence. What's controversial is that most of the world has been given a very specific image of what biblical figures looked like, and almost nobody asks where that image actually came from. So today, we're going to do something different. We're not going to argue. We're not going to preach. We're going to open the actual text, look at the actual history, look at the actual science, and let you decide what to do with what you find. Fair enough? Let's go. The first thing you need to understand is geography. The Bible is not a European book. Every event in the Old and New Testaments takes place in a region that sits at the intersection of Africa, the Middle East, and the Mediterranean. Ancient Israel, Egypt, Cush, Midian, and Cyrene are the locations where biblical history unfolds. Egypt is in Africa. Cush, the Hebrew word translated as Ethiopia in most English Bibles, refers to the land south of Egypt, stretching into modern-day Sudan, Eritrea, and parts of Ethiopia. This is not speculation. This is the map. And yet, when most people picture Moses, Abraham, David, or Jesus, they picture men who look like they come from Northern Europe. That image did not come from the text. It came from Renaissance paintings commissioned by European patrons, painted by European artists, modeled after European faces. The Bible never describes a single one of these figures as white, but it does describe several of them as African. Let us look at what the text actually says. Numbers chapter 12, verse 1. Moses married a Cushite woman. The Hebrew word used is Cushite, a woman from Cush, the region south of Egypt where the people were known for their dark skin. This is not ambiguous. Jeremiah chapter 13 verse 23 asks, "Can the Cushite change his skin?" And it uses the same Hebrew root word. The verse draws attention to skin color as a distinguishing feature of Cushite people. Biblical scholar Daniel Hayes, in his book From Every People and Nation, A Biblical Theology of Race, writes that it is quite clear that Moses married a black African woman. When Moses' siblings Miriam and Aaron objected to this marriage, God did not punish Moses. He struck Miriam with a skin disease that turned her skin white as snow. The Bible recorded that detail. Make of it what you will. If you want to understand the stories they left out of the version they taught you, subscribe now, because this is just the beginning. Now let's talk about the people of Cush in the broader biblical narrative. Ethiopia, or Cush, appears over 40 times across the Old and New Testaments. That is more than most nations that modern Christians could name from Scripture. Genesis chapter 2 verse 13 places Cush at the very origin of creation, describing the river Gihon that winds through the entire land of Cush. In 2 Chronicles chapter 14 verse 9, Zerah the Cushite commands an army of 1 million soldiers against Judah, a detail that portrays Cush not as a footnote but as a military superpower of the ancient world. The 25th dynasty of Egypt, from roughly 747 BC to 656 BC, was ruled entirely by Cushite pharaohs, black pharaohs. They governed Egypt during the period when many Old Testament prophets were actively writing. Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel all reference Cush as a major power. These are not obscure footnotes. These are central characters in the biblical story who happen to be African, and who have been systematically de-emphasized in how that story gets taught in the Western world. Then there is the New Testament. Acts chapter 8, verses 26 through 39 tells the story of an Ethiopian eunuch, a high-ranking treasury official serving Queen Candace of Ethiopia. This man traveled to Jerusalem to worship, was reading the book of Isaiah in his chariot on the way home, and was baptized by the Apostle Philip on the roadside. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church, one of the oldest Christian institutions on earth, traces its founding to this moment. Christianity did not arrive in Africa through European missionaries. According to the Bible's own text, an African man carried it there within the first generation after Jesus' death. And he was not the only African in the New Testament. Simon of Cyrene, the man who carried the cross of Jesus to Golgotha, was from Cyrene, a city in modern-day Libya in North Africa. He is mentioned in Matthew chapter 27, Mark chapter 15, and Luke chapter 23. Mark even names Simon's sons Alexander and Rufus, suggesting that they became known figures in the early church. In Acts chapter 13, verse 1, the leadership of the church at Antioch includes Simeon called Niger. Niger is a Latin word. It means black. Then there is Apollos, described in Acts chapter 18, verse 24, as being from Alexandria, the great city in Egypt. North Africa produced some of the most important theologians in Christian history. Tertullian came from Carthage in modern-day Tunisia. Cyprian came from Carthage. Origen and Clement came from Alexandria in Egypt. Augustine of Hippo, arguably the most influential Christian theologian who ever lived, was born in what is now Algeria. Three of the earliest popes were from Africa: Victor I, Miltiades, and Gelasius I. Christianity was an African religion before it was a European one. That is not ideology. That is the historical record. Now here's where it gets really uncomfortable. In southern Africa, there's an ethnic group called the Lemba people. They live in South Africa, Zimbabwe, Malawi, and Mozambique. For centuries, the Lemba have claimed Jewish ancestry, saying they migrated south from ancient Israel through Yemen. Most scholars dismiss this as oral tradition without basis. Then, in the year 2000, a genetic study published in the American Journal of Human Genetics tested 399 Y chromosomes from 6 populations, including the Lemba, Bantu populations, Yemeni Arabs, Sephardic Jews, and Ashkenazi Jews. What they found was striking. The Lemba Y chromosomes divided clearly into Semitic and Bantu lineages, consistent with their oral history of mixed origins. But the most remarkable finding was in the Buba clan, the clan that Lemba oral tradition says led them out of Israel. 50% of males in the Buba clan carried the Cohen modal haplotype, the genetic marker associated with the Jewish priestly class, descended from Aaron, the brother of Moses. That frequency is higher than what is found in the general Jewish population worldwide. A follow-up study confirmed the presence of Semitic origin Y chromosomes in Lemba men at significant frequencies. These are black African men living in southern Africa, carrying genetic markers that connect them to the ancient Jewish priesthood. The science does not say they are the Israelites, but it says something happened. Some ancient migration, some real historical connection that conventional history never accounted for. And then there's Beta Israel, the Ethiopian Jews who practiced a form of Judaism older than Rabbinic Judaism for over 2,000 years. They had the Torah, but never received the Talmud. They observed the Sabbath, practiced animal sacrifice, maintained kosher dietary laws, and followed a lunar calendar unique to their community. They were completely isolated from the rest of the Jewish world, so isolated that many did not even know other Jews still existed. In the 1970s, the chief rabbis of Israel recognized the Beta Israel as Jews under the law of return. Israel airlifted thousands of Ethiopian Jews to Israel in Operation Moses in 1984 and Operation Solomon in 1991. Over 168,000 Ethiopian Jews now live in Israel. But when they arrived, they faced discrimination that tells its own story. In 1996, the Israeli newspaper Ma'ariv revealed that the Magen David Adom blood bank had been systematically throwing away blood donated by Ethiopian Israelis without informing the donors. A nation founded on biblical identity was discarding the blood of people who had practiced biblical Judaism longer than almost anyone else on earth. So let's come back to the question, were the people of the Bible black? The honest answer is that the Bible describes a world that was far more African than the one you were taught about in Sunday school. Moses married a black woman. The man who carried Jesus' cross was from North Africa. One of the early church leaders was literally called the Black One. Christianity reached Ethiopia before it reached most of Europe. African theologians shaped the foundational doctrines of the faith. And there are black African people alive today, carrying genetic markers that connect them to the ancient Jewish priesthood, verified by peer-reviewed science published in one of the world's leading genetics journals. None of this means what the black Hebrew Israelites claim. None of this means what white supremacists fear. It means something simpler and more profound than either group is prepared to accept. The Bible was written in a part of the world where African people were central, not peripheral, not footnotes, not sidekicks. They were prophets, queens, military commanders, church founders, and priests. And somewhere between the ancient world and the modern one, that reality was painted over, literally, with European faces on every wall, every ceiling, every children's Bible, and every Hollywood film. The question was never whether black people were in the Bible. They're on almost every page. The real question is why it took you this long to hear about it. Thank you for watching. If this changed how you see the Bible, or if it confirms something you always suspected, drop a comment right now and tell me which part hit you the hardest. Like this video and subscribe if you want more questions that nobody else is willing to ask honestly. I'll see you in the next one.